Hello, I'm Alexa Garvoille. I am an MFA candidate at Virginia Tech, and I'm going to be talking about building literary community through online reading series. So, in the spring of 2020, when in person events were canceled and stay at home orders began, campus student reading series and open mics, a central community event for many writing programs, were either canceled or reformatted. This presentation details my own response to quarantine as a graduate student in an MFA program, which involved the creation of a community building student reading series informed by principles of educational psychology, social justice, and organizing. In this presentation and in our Q&A, I'd like to engage with you in a conversation about how your department or program creates or fosters community through student or participant readings or open mics, and what we can do to be more inclusive with our event planning in general. As we know from scores of MFA horror stories, putting writers together in a room does not create community. Communities need to be intentionally built by their members. So as writers in a pandemic, we've connected online, we've created new models for readings, and people have held virtual book tours. But this ignores the groups of students who frequent campus open mics or the readings that create community within an MFA program. These are not free-for-alls for anyone who downloads Zoom. They actually are catering for specific communities and have specific aims, which are often not necessarily about hearing the work. Reading events for these groups build community through routine, mutual encouragement, and social interaction. So how can this community building continue when we can't be in the same room together? So my classmate and co-host Taylor Portella and I answered this question by creating the New River Revival's Socially Distant Reading Series as a weekly event in the spring of 2020 that featured a student-run craft talk for 25 minutes and then 3 readers that each read for 10 to 15 minutes each. And we're continuing this series in a monthly format this academic year. Historically, the New River Revival has been the name of our student open mic series, but instead of an open mic, we chose to curate an event in order to promote diversity of genre and voices, which is an important value in our MFA program, and also to increase a level of predictability in the uncertain times of the pandemic. So today I want to share a little bit about how our event worked and what principles guided it so that other literary communities separated by distance can continue to connect over art. A little bit of background: before entering my MFA program, I taught in public schools where I gained organizing skills to support the work of my local union. When my co-host and I began planning our reading series in the spring, I soon realized I was tapping into these organizing principles. So I'm applying a labor union and community organizing framework to this talk with a little bit of educational psychology thrown in. Today I'm going to focus on 3 broadly applicable organizing concepts: creating a culture of support, empowering participants with ownership, and building practices of intentional inclusivity. I hope this crash course in the marriage of community organizing and creative writing event planning will help your institution begin to create more inclusive literary spaces. First, I'd like you to reflect on your own institution or organization's events. A few questions just to think about. How are participants in your writing program engaging with each other besides in the classroom? In what ways are your program leaders facilitating community building outside of the classroom? Are there any systems in place to promote community? Annual events, student groups, brown bag lunches? And how do structures of power and oppression, even inadvertently, shape your program's literary events? Think about who reads. Who shows up? Who's in charge? Whose voices are heard? And whose are missing? So before diving into how we worked through these questions in our reading series, I want to tell you a little bit about more about the event for context. So it was held at the same time each week. We kept to a strict schedule, which I've got in my accessibility script. And we didn't ask anyone to focus on anything for more than 20 minutes at a time. Learning science and studies on attention span have demonstrated that chunking improves retention and satisfaction. So even if people aren't trying to learn anything through a reading, they'll be more satisfied. So we divided this program into 15-minute chunks with 5-minute breaks. Breaks between each speaker were designed to build community. We used interactive games, we shared baby pictures and guessed who was who. We did sweatpants fashion shows, pet and plant show and tell, and more. And I've got a list of these in my document. Usually our halfway point break also asks people to get up and physically engage in some way just to keep the blood moving. So it was important for us that an event designed to serve a community actually allowed for that community to engage in meaningful ways with one another, since the kinds of side conversations that you would get in a bar, for instance, don't happen over Zoom. They can't. So here are the guiding principles that we followed. These borrow from psychology and organizing. And these principles, I think, can be applied to any event. They're first, building a culture of support. Second, allowing for community ownership and buy-in. And third, creating intentional inclusivity. So first, the culture of support. By engaging in empathetic joy, in this case, the celebrating of the talent and art of others, we can hopefully push against jealousy. Workshops often operate within the deficit model. That is, everything that comes to workshop has something wrong with it, and the workshop fixes it. But this status quo of critique and, power and disempower, often espoused in the classroom, I think could find a joyful counterbalance in student readings. Unconditional positive regard, the expression of empathy and support for a person no matter what, may enhance creativity in young people, educational psychology suggests, and can also lessen the impact of the kind of creative mortification that can occur in workshop. And creative mortification is a term used in ed psychology to refer to the decreased willingness to pursue a particular creative aspiration following a negative performance outcome, aka a bad workshop. And research suggests that creative mortification can be moderated and lessened based on the sociocultural context, in this case, community. Basically, if we can keep more writers writing if there's a supportive community built outside of workshop. So Taylor and I wanted the purpose of these readings to be supportive and empowering and not judgmental at all. So what we did was two things. First, we encouraged everyone to be really positive and engaged in the chat function in the Zoom meeting. And then the second thing we did was follow up compliment emails to all of the readers. We announced at the beginning of each reading what our protocols were for the reading. So for instance, we had everyone unmute after each reader to applaud so the reader could get that feedback. And we also asked people to use the chat generously. And as the hosts, Taylor and I had to model that by being all in the chat frequently. So what that looked like was including quotes of parts of the reading that we really liked, or there were sometimes just compliments about the reading, commentary, comments about how this was in workshop and this is a new edit and they love the new edit, inside jokes, whatever it is. That's the community we're looking for. So this use of chat increased the camaraderie of the program and allowed for more engagement and communal socializing, even beyond friend groups that we would have had during an in-person reading. So more people could connect with more people than would have happened basically like at the bar where we would have had this reading. And then in terms of the compliment emails, we did post-reading shout-outs. So we gathered this through a Google form that I sent out to all the participants after the reading, and it asked for compliments for all of the readers, and then also any suggestions or thoughts for next time. And what I did is I gathered all of these compliments, copied and pasted them from the form into an email for the reader, took off the names so they were anonymous, and I also included the Zoom chat that was relevant to that reader so they could see what lines people liked, and then just sent them that email. And this was another way of creating community. So by bolstering one another as artists, we grew more comfortable, and this is a bond that could only positively impact our workshops once we have them in person again, and even when we're doing workshops over Zoom. And these emails were gladly received, sometimes with tears and always with thanks. It's definitely a bright spot of people's weeks. So we wanted the reading to create this culture of support that combats literary jealousy, that balances with praise the deficit model of workshop, and that provides artists with unconditional positive regard, which is shown to even enhance creativity in young people. Second, empowering participants through ownership. So instead of just creating this event, we actually surveyed and talked to our classmates about what they wanted in an event, and we'll need to continue reevaluating this year as we continue the program. This was our version of one-on-ones, which is a one-on-one kind of organizing conversation to hear about what people are thinking about, what their concerns are, what their needs are, and really trying to respond to the community need. And then I mentioned in the Google Forms, there was also a space for what do you want next time? Like, what ideas do you have? What do you want from this program? So people can have that kind of buy-in. And then right after, people suggest things, then the goal is to immediately try to commit them to doing that. So if somebody suggested baby pictures, which someone did, I then was able to get in touch with that person and get their thoughts on how we could organize that. Or if somebody wanted to do pet and plant show and tell, we made sure to do that and have that person lead it, for instance, would be a way of creating that kind of buy-in. Organizing also taught me that each person can serve the cause according to their talents and resources. So for this series, we thought about the talents and interests of our group. So one classmate can make fancy drinks, so she served as the remote bartender for one of our events. Another was a musician, so he played and did a concert instead of having a craft talk one week. My co-host does drag as Lavender Scare, so Lavender Scare performed every week. So we were able to include everyone's different skills and capitalize on their skills for this series. We know that communities are functional when people's values and skills are being used for a greater good, whether it's making demands for a school board or bringing an MFA program together during quarantine. The third principle is intentional inclusivity. And that's with regards to race, gender, orientation, caretaker status, age, genre, year in the program, etc. So in planning, my co-host and I did our best to prevent holding readings that didn't represent the diversity of our program. So we tried to balance all of these identity markers, and certainly never to have an all-white reading lineup, things like that, or all fiction or all first years, whatever it is. So 2 techniques for increasing engagement across these different social groups and identity groups is first building on and collaborating with existing structures. So for instance, Pride Week at Virginia Tech happened during quarantine. It wasn't really publicly celebrated, so we did a Pride Week version of our event that everybody is able to get involved in, and we included more than our average number of readers in that event. And because it was marketed as like Pride Week, it lent our event credibility. There was also Undergraduate Literary Awards that happened, and the events for that were canceled, so we had the winner of that award come and read during one of our series readings. Second is this is what it's in community organizing. This is called mapping your building. So as an organizer, I learned how to draw in different groups of people to events or get support from different groups of people. And how to do that is you find the leaders in your organization, and leaders are simply defined as those with followers. And you give the leaders important roles. So for instance, early on, we reached out to some folks with established followings to be our first readers. And each reading we think about the people we haven't seen in the Zoom, and we try to figure out who could bring them along and how. So to sum up, by intentionally planning diverse programs, reaching out to key members, and attempting to draw in all the different groups of MFAs, we created a community space that provided at least our program with a sense of stability during these unstable times. It's important to remember that leaders need to step up to intentionally work to create community within writing programs. If you don't, you're letting inertia drive the community, and you're allowing the biases ingrained in us to be replicated in a space that many writers hope will be a safe place for creativity. I've included some of the visuals and some more details about the setup of our series in my accessibility script, so you can check those out. Thank you so much for listening, and I really look forward to talking to everybody about this topic and about building community more broadly with you on Friday at 10:30. See you then.